supported by San Juan Health Partners Urology, providing a wide range of personalized services for the whole family, including children. Our caring professionals are dedicated to helping meet your urology health needs with skill, experience, and service you need. For a complete listing of our services and to learn more, visit sanjuanhealthpartners.com or call 505-609-6300. San Juan Health Partners Urology, a division of San Juan Regional Medical Center. Minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Wednesday morning, August 22nd, and you're listening to the Scott Micklin Morning Program here on KSJE, 90.9 FM and 90.9 HD. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Micklin, and thank you for tuning in. And greetings to our viewers who are watching on KSJE's Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Coming up in just a moment, my guest this morning, Farmington City Manager Rob Mays. But before we get to that discussion, I want to talk to you about a couple other things that are going on, reminding you that later on this morning, we'll take our weekly trip to the Encouragement Lab. Communications professor Dr. Mike Hadabaugh will be here talking about confidence for us this morning. And don't forget Roving with the Arts at 9 a.m. here on KSJE. Some arts news for you. Also some Bruckner Symphonies coming up today at 9. And our local and regional author program is on tap today at 10:30, right on Four Corners. And today, our featured author is Elizabeth Church. She has written the books The Atomic Weight of Love and also the book All the Beautiful Girls. You'll hear that interview today at 10:30 on KSJE. But now let me turn to my guest who's here with me in the studio. Farmington City Manager Rob Mays is here. Mr. Mays, good morning.
Good morning, Scott. It's good to be here.
Good to have you here with us this morning. Welcome back to KSJE, and we appreciate you being here. You've left a meeting to come here, and you're going to go back to the meeting.
Yeah, and this is my first time in your new studio. I'm afraid this video platform is going to kind of ruin my perfect radio face, but I'm sure others are adjusting to the exact same.
We're all doing just fine.
New world.
Yes, we're all doing just fine, and I appreciate you being here because there was a pretty significant city council meeting yesterday, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the actions taken at that meeting because a lot of times we don't talk a lot about tax increases, and the city of Farmington passed one and passed it, as far as I understand, unanimously.
Yes, that's right.
So let's talk a little bit about that. We have some graphics to help explain what we're talking about to our viewers this morning. But in the meantime, how did we get here? Okay,
so yeah, I think there are some slides that'll bring a lot of dimension to this conversation as we move through it. But the bottom line is this goes back quite some time. I have been talking for a number of years that the noose is tightening a little bit on us bit by bit, and I've got a slide for that in a minute, that we, after really 10 years of governing by austerity,
right,
things have been catching up with us. And while the fact of the matter is that people really do like to think of government as getting smaller, we really think in terms of being good stewards of the dollars, because the fact of the matter is at the local level, people continue to ask for more when it comes to services. But over the last years, things have come to a head as we've seen a lot of deferred maintenance on buildings and facilities, catastrophic roof failures, the fleet getting, we had a big push a couple of years or so ago from citizens just wanting the police cars replaced, and so there's a lot of wants, but we have things catching up with us. And so in this budget process this year, we asked some questions. Instead of how little what can we cut, we said, what are the things what's not in the budget that needs to be? What's catching up? So some true financial strategic planning associated with sustainability going forward. And what I presented to the council was facts and data that really brought us to an undeniable reality. We either have to reduce the scope of our services and the demands and expectations of our public to meet the revenues, or we need to increase the revenues, or a combination of both of those reductions.
Right.
At the end of the day, people really don't want to see our services cut back, less hours at the library, or close some parks, or whatever.
Less police officers, less firefighters, I suppose, if it got there, right?
Well, absolutely. In fact, they're wanting more. We have needs, proactive needs in law enforcement that aren't being met. And so that's kind of where this began, as a real honest evaluation of that.
And the revenues coming into the city have been on a decline since that Great Recession, I think, for almost a decade now. And revenues from the state aren't going anywhere fast.
Right. Why don't you
the other issue?
Why don't you move to that? The slide's about 4 in. And
okay.
It kind of shows a picture of exactly what you just did. It's a line graph of our revenues.
All right. Easier said than done, maybe.
Well, you know what?
But I can get
there. Why don't we just go in order? Let's start with exactly what happened last night, and then we'll move right there. So the city council passed a 5/8 tax. You said that's the total cumulative tax that you're seeing on the screen, but those were specified for specific needs. Because that's a way that I think it's much more palatable for the public if they have a sense of what is that money going to, and does it match their priorities with our needs.
More palatable for your council, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there was 1/8 that were dedicated to public safety, police and fire, 1/8 to street paving. We need to be paving, Scott, between $4 and $5 million a year to keep up with our pavement, our streets, the way our public wants it.
Right.
Right now, available funding for that is about $1 million a year, and we're going to see that. Why? Is that tax base has gone down. There's a dedicated tax right now to streets, but it has shrunk.
Right.
So but
the number of streets hasn't shrunk.
It has not.
Yeah.
In fact, getting to maintain them has gotten more expensive.
Right.
So it's a simple choice. We either have to let our streets deteriorate, or shift money from other programs and services to streets. And so in the end, the council decided that the public this would be something palatable to the public, that 1/8 would be dedicated pure 100%. And 1/8 is the hold harmless. And I've been on this program talking about hold harmless for a long time, but just the quick answer there is this is the money that's needed to replace money that the state is taking from us.
And they're phasing that out.
They're phasing that out.
Getting more and more every year.
The quick genesis of that is that the state continues to shrink the tax base, forcing local governments to raise their rate. And so in 2004, they took food and medicine out of the tax base. At the same time, the state simultaneously passed a 0.5% increase on everything else that people buy in order to fund what's called hold harmless.
Right.
And that's where they continue to pay the city as if we were receiving that tax. Fast forward 2014, they reneged on that promise to the citizens of New Mexico, and they kept the 0.5% for themselves, and they're phasing out the reimbursement payments to us over 15 years. And we'll briefly touch on that. But their answer to the local governments was, we're going to take your money, we're going to keep the 0.5%, you raise taxes 3/8. This is the 1/3 of that hold harmless that we have to put in, and in the end, it's only going to replace what the state is taking. So ultimately, the citizens won't get any benefit out of that as far as new services or maintenance catch up on projects, because it's going away.
But nothing more cut, hopefully.
Exactly.
I guess
it'll hold. Yeah, that's the idea.
Are.
It's a reimbursement. It's to hold the line on where they're at.
Gotcha.
And that's where these first 3/8 is where most of our discussions in our budget process focused, and because that's really my job, is to bring the facts to the council, and they ultimately set policy and decide what will Farmington be. The fact is people talk about taxes. It's the only way we have revenue primarily.
Right.
And taxes for Farmington could be anywhere from 0 to 3 or 4%. You say 0, how could that be? Well, I'm not being facetious when I make a philosophical point. The city of Farmington does not even need to exist. We could be an unincorporated area of San Juan County.
Right.
And people would receive the services that come from the state tax base and the county tax base, which is very different than the kinds of expectations people have who live in a municipality. The reason we have taxes at all is because citizens got together and said, we want to incorporate. And we are willing to pay a higher tax rate than the state and the county rate to have more. And if we wanted less services, we'd live out in the county. And so that's the philosophical basis for the whole thing. And so what is the right amount? That is fundamentally decided by our elected officials as they represent their citizens to decide. And so their judgment, based on listening to their constituents, was that at this stage, our citizens don't want to cut back. They want to maintain their services, and they recognize that you can't have a police officer that you don't pay, train, equip, and have a police car for. So you got to face the music. If you can't afford the car, the training, the outfitting of that officer, then you got to recognize as a community you can't have that police officer anymore. So you have to decide that reality. So
So that's where we are.
That's the 3/8.
And that's the 3/8. And then there was a final.
Right. So our mayor, who has really come into office with a grand vision for the future of this community, believing that our best days aren't behind us, our best days have to be in front of us, or why do we exist? And realizing that in order to pivot this community from being a wonderful oil and gas and energy community, probably the best anywhere in terms of the quality of things that we have and what we're proud of here in this community, from our libraries to our schools to our parks, our college. But if we are going to be a community that can compete in a new world, in a new economy, where people have to want to live somewhere, as well as to capitalize on really the outdoor recreation opportunities in terms of economic development, then we had to get serious about funding it. The fact that
putting your money where your mouth is.
Put your money where your mouth is what we said. And so our mayor, in a bold move, proposed a 0.25% tax, a little over $4 million a year, to fund economic development, and community transformation. A lot of really great, smart people have been talking about economic diversification for decades, but in earnest for the last 10 years. But our entire budget devoted by all the county and the governmental entities and the private sector, about $380,000 a year. So that's it. So as a community, no one had stepped up and put in. And by the way, half of that comes from the city of Farmington, and all the rest come up with the balance of it. And our mayor said that's not acceptable. We're sitting by and watching opportunity go by, and of course the time clock is clicking, and the potential, closure of the San Juan generating station, and so we have more challenges ahead. Right. And she said the time is now. We need to be funding economic development by 10 times what we are right now. And he boldly proposed the tax. About 3.5 weeks of a lot of work, a lot of additional pulling together all the due diligence and work that so many stakeholder groups, from the outdoor recreation group to the Chamber of Commerce to Four Corners Economic Development to the CVB, lots of people have been involved in laying the groundwork. So it was the time. It was the time to fund it.
And a lot of people might say, but that $300,000, $400,000 sounds like a lot of money. But to do the things that you want to do with that big vision, it takes talking in the millions, I suppose, to really make an impact and to compete with everybody else who's also putting large sums of money into this new future.
That's exactly right. You hit the hammer on the nail. The other places that have managed to pivot their economies to shift from a historic tax base to a new one that matches the modern world, they spend 10 times that at minimum, because there's so many facets to economic development, from the infrastructure necessary to attract and be a catalyst to the private sector, to public-private partnerships for development. We compete for RFPs for our community and Four Corners Economic Development files. We respond to requests for proposals on bringing jobs all the time. Right. But we never can check the boxes on the things that they're looking for. And
not everything.
That's right. And sometimes they are looking for some level of incentive, some level of kind of lowering their risk, or property availability at a lower rent, or incentives are a very, very complex matter. But at the end of the day, that's who's getting the good jobs coming to their communities. There has to be money to work with each of these developers and say, what do we need to do to create a win-win for our taxpayers and for our jobs? Right.
And so here we are. We've got 5/8 of a percent being added to, this is the gross receipts tax. And so again, another part of this is that it's not just a tax burden, if you will, on city residents. It is all those folks who come in to shop here, which we still have a pretty good attraction retail-wise from folks throughout the region, and that shares that expense among everybody.
It really does, and that's a very valid and fair point. This is where people want to come and need to come to shop, and when they come to town, of course, they do add burden to our tax base too, and our services, and they utilize these facilities, particularly our recreational facilities, our parks, our library, and they put pressure on public safety and public infrastructure, and so it's fair that it's paid, and you're exactly right. We've got over 300,000 people that come and share in that, and that's to really have access here. And that deal for our locals a shared burden. That's exactly right.
Right. And so with this, there may be some folks thinking, well, I didn't get to vote on this. How come the city council is able to raise my taxes and I didn't get to vote? I was wanting to do that, but that is something the city council can do.
Well, the answer is it depends. Both are true.
Okay.
So the state legislature spells out all the specific increments that can be imposed. They are labeled, they are limited, they are finite. And each one has a different set of rules. So about half of the allowable tax increments can be passed by ordinance by the city council, and about half of them require a referendum vote. And they're all listed and spelled out. In fact, my budget presentation every year actually spells those out, and that's online. But these particular increments were ones that when the state legislature created them as an option, they do not require a referendum.
I see. And I think I recall maybe a previous mayor or city council who was maybe more in favor of having the public vote on some of these things maybe than this mayor and city council
Well,
is.
Again, it just depends, and probably that was driven more by what's allowable in the law and which tax instruments were being discussed. But that's a great debate, and that's a great point. But the legislature, for a reason, has created different increments with different responsibilities.
As I mentioned, it was vote, but I didn't watch the video to see if anyone was holding their nose when they cast their vote. But it seemed like, even though maybe some of the council members didn't like the idea of raising taxes, they still feel maybe politically against that concept. Yeah. They saw the need to do it and maybe the long-term benefits of doing it. Is that a fair statement?
It is, and I think holding the nose is exactly right. We all did, and we all have. We all, at face value, don't like taxes, and we're taxed enough. But we really work to explain the difference, and it's apples and oranges. Ideology and political philosophy really has no place in local government. That's why the Farmington City Council is not a partisan. We have to work. If our services don't work, we fail as a community, and it impacts people's life. The state and federal government is a little bit disconnected to local citizens, and so generally speaking, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You want policemen and your trained police officers. You want nice parks. You want the parks mowed. When your neighbor has weeds in their yard, you immediately want to call and ask for you want more government. You want government out there restricting your neighbor's private property because you don't want those weeds affecting you. That's why we live in a community, and it's just a different. And so I think we all have our various philosophical and ideology that governs a lot of how we think. But when it comes to really understanding local government, we have cut as much as we can, as lean as we can, and people don't want their services cut. That's the bottom line. So we had an overflow packed. We had 3 public hearings, but one major one that we really emphasized. And it was a packed house, overflow, set up chairs in the lobby, and it was nearly unanimous, people one after another getting up and speaking, telling the city council we hate taxes, but we have to do it. And again, a component of this, remember, is the first 3 yes, they're about maintaining. Mm-hmm. But this 4th is about advancing. And it's a stretch. It's a stretch to do it. But the sense is that this had to be done so that we can invest in our future and get serious about economic diversification and bringing jobs here. And I didn't mention earlier, but that 4th is going to be entirely accounted for in a special fund. It cannot be commingled with the general fund. It cannot We cannot just absorb it into the recurring operations of the city. It will be very accountable that each dollar really does get spent on return on investment projects. We really, in some ways, are making we'll be making some dramatic reorganizations. We've spent the last 10 years, again, in austerity, trying to keep our heads above water. We need to catch up on a lot of non-sexy things like roofs that are falling in, and things like that around ballparks and fields that are dilapidated, and chains and fences falling off dugouts, and on it goes. I could list hundreds of projects that over time we've had to defer the proper maintenance on those things to live within the tax base that we'll talk about here in just a second.
Sure. Let me ask you,
Sure.
Mr. Mays, a little bit. When folks look at this, or maybe look back on this, is this a turning point for the city of Farmington, this decision? I mean, it seems like a pretty big, bold step.
It is. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I do believe this is a defining moment, and a lot of our citizens talked about that, and we talked about that in the presentation. You go back in the community, an example of defining moments. Do you know that twice, and you may remember some of these, twice this community in a referendum voted down building a new airport and said that's good enough up there, our short runway. A defining moment. We defined the future of Farmington, whereas we, at this stage, cannot have jet service because our runway is too short. Defining moment where the vision was cast and the people rejected it. I think about Lake Farmington, our reservoir. That's the most important asset that we have in terms of having any kind of a future in this region. And do you realize it passed by a 3-2 vote by the City Council? Once again, by a narrow margin, a defining moment. Almost was defeated by the naysayers, and those with vision won out.
Right.
So I give you two examples of defining moments that one went one way, one went another, and they have created what our future is, undeniably. So
positive and negative.
And negatively.
Right.
And so, do I believe this is a defining moment? Yes. Now, trust me, my team and our elected officials and our community stakeholders, hundreds of people that are vested in this economic development effort around this community, our lives just got a lot harder because now we got to go to work. And we can't just sit back and rest in our maintenance mode, hoping that somebody else will come along and rescue us, or hoping that our state won't hurt us anymore and stop taking money from us, or hoping we're taking it by and I commend our mayor tremendously for stepping up and taking this risk. I told him, you just stuck your head out of the foxhole and jumped out and led. And others got on board and are following. And we are already beginning to discuss ways we have to reorganize around this new reality. We're no longer just be in maintenance mode. We are going to be reorganizing some of our top people, almost kind of restructuring a little bit of organization, because we have to act now, and we have to, and our public, rightly so, and our elected officials that have stepped out on this and voted for this tax. So we need results, and that's where we're at. We have to produce results. And I'll go one step further. I believe this city council, related to this kind of ideology of I think they would actually repeal this tax if we can't successful invest it in this community, and because it's been restricted into an account anyway.
Right.
We're all going to be very, very accountable for it. If all of a sudden millions and millions of dollars start building up in this account and we aren't getting any projects on the ground that bring jobs, public, rightly so, is going to throw us all out.
But certainly it's not going to change overnight. There needs to be a little bit of time to see some results. And I imagine the City Council is expecting that too.
Yes. I mean, true economic transformation is a decades of game. And we are so far behind because we have lots of ideas, but no money's been invested significantly.
Right.
So we all recognize that, and I've really appreciated some of our best leaders in economic development from Forset, reminded the City Council this is a long haul. It can be decades before you really see a complete transformation. But having said that, we have to have that big long-term picture, but we also know there is low-hanging fruit. There are projects and initiatives that have due diligence has been done, and we're ready to start implementing. But it's a balance between we have to see progress and get things on the ground, as well as laying the ground. Because a lot of the things that the government does is our job is to be a catalyst for the private sector to be successful. So we have to build the infrastructure. We have to find out we're doing a lot of gap analysis right now. So I know I digress here a little bit, but we're looking at all of our well, maybe, well, we probably better try.
Let's take a break.
Yeah,
let's take a break, Mr. Mays, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of these things and some of the other projects. Maybe that some of this money is hopefully going to be used for. Airport, I think, is one of them.
It's our top of the list.
And so let's take a short break, everyone. When we come back, more with my guest, City Manager Rob Mays, in just a moment, right here on KSJE. This program on KSJE is supported by Citizens Trust and Investment Corporation.